financial crisis recovery.
Foreclosure, short sales, bankruptcy, credit card debt, job loss, depreciating home values, money management. Peace of mind when it comes to your finances seems completely out of reach under current conditions, but there is a way to achieve it. For the next 60 minutes, you're going to find out how to cover your assets. Cover your assets.
And we are back with Curtis Zahn from Champion Law, representing the consumer who has overwhelming student loan debt. I want to again encourage you to go to the Financial Crisis Bible. That's www.financialcrisisbible.com. This is for people who are already facing a financial crisis or could be facing one in the future. And lastly, for people who want to ensure that they never are in a financial crisis. You can also contact me at Todd@AskToddRooker.com. That's Todd@AskToddRooker.com, or call us at 763-559-3800. Once again, I'd like to encourage any of our listeners who are struggling with student loans or would just like specific questions about the topic answered of student loan debt, feel free to give us a call at 651-646-8255. One more time, that number is 651-646-8255. And, we talk a lot on this show about debt collectors, and Curtis happens to have an edge, having been on both sides of the bargaining table. What information can you give, having been on both sides of the collector table, that gives people that you work with the distinct advantage over the collectors who are trying to come after them?
Well, I think, one of the things that you realize when you've been on both sides is that the other side knows that they probably violated the law and they want to settle. Because I got to tell you, when I used to get demand letters, I would look at the complaint and see what they were saying that was violated. And it wasn't uncommon for me to find that all the things that they said didn't actually occur. I mean, they talk to their clients. It's not entirely accurate. And so they'll say A, B, and C happened, and I'll look for A, B, and C. And A, B, and C didn't happen. But I find X, Y, and Z because, as I think you mentioned earlier, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act has a lot of requirements, a lot of things you have to do and a lot of things you can't do. And when you consider the kind of the people who are getting hired to be debt collectors, it's a tough business. I've heard there's 100% turnover every year in that business. And to kind of keep them up on this stuff, I mean, it's tough for lawyers to keep up on it. So you find them it's not uncommon for them to be committing violations.
Well, one of the things that I believe is that for a consumer, the first and most fundamental thing that you can do to bolster your case, if you feel like you're being bullied by collectors, is you get yourself a recorder on that telephone, and you record the conversations that you have with the debt collections agent. And oftentimes that in and of itself will provide you with all the ammunition you need right there.
Absolutely. And I would say, not only do that, but, keep anytime they call and leave you a message, make sure you keep that. Any letters that you get from, keep everything that you have, but by keeping those recordings, because they're going to say all kinds of stuff. I mean, whenever they call you or you call into them, they often hear that recording like, oh, this is being recorded. But I got to tell you, in my experience, they say they're recording the calls, and maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they definitely don't keep them because it's going to be usually ammunition against them. Some of them are required under maybe their contract with their client. For example, any client with the Department of Education has to keep them for, I think, 90 days. But most of them, especially the ones that are most likely to break the law, are definitely not going to be keeping those recordings. So you want to have your own recording for sure.
Well, and one of the things that I really want to bring to bear here, because it's something that I deal with my clients and so frequently I see, which is that consumers will get out of college and immediately, for whatever reason, they're encouraged to take those student loan debts and consolidate them into one debt. And so you'll take multitudes of different student loans and they will consolidate all of them together. And here's what I see. They will consolidate a tremendous amount of debt. That agency, whoever is doing the consolidation, will take all of that debt, put it into one bundle, and then once they've purchased that debt, a lot of the protections that might have otherwise been afforded that consumer go away because it's no longer owned by the federal government in some cases, or if it is private debt. Remember, and this is what I've been told, and I want you to tell me if that's right or wrong, unsecured debt has a maximum usury of 33%, which is 32.9%. So I find people who have 20+% interest rates on student loans after having consolidated them, and it just blows my mind when we're talking about $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 worth of debt. My God, the payment plans on these doggone things is more than their rent or their house payment.
Well, and I think, Todd, that's another big point that you've raised there. Again, it's the difference between private and federally guaranteed student loans, and that's the key. Just the other night, my girlfriend was asking me, why can't I consolidate my private student loan, with my federal student loans? And that's just not allowed.
Right.
Now, if you consolidate your federally guaranteed student loans into a federally guaranteed consolidation loan, you don't lose any of these protections. You have all the same rights, and that's great for them. And the interest rate is the weighted average of all of your loans. So you're not really being hurt. But what I think you might get, though, is that someone says, well, I want to get all my student loans together in one bundle. So you have the private lender saying, well, if you want to do that, consolidate all of your federally guaranteed student loans into this. The only way to do it is to put it in this private consolidation
There you
loan.
go. That's what I'm talking about.
And so now suddenly, maybe you had an $8,000 private loan and you had $50,000 in federally guaranteed student loan, which has very favorable rates. Next thing you know, now you have a $58,000 private consolidation loan with none of the protections of a federally guaranteed student loan, none of the caps. And they said, then you're in big trouble.
And look, I have been told by consumers, my clients, that they were encouraged to do exactly that, believing that the overall blended rate would be better, which, of course, if you did the math, you'd probably figure out immediately that that's not true. But what's really more important is you lose all the protections afforded you as a result of doing that. Very dangerous thing. We want to encourage you to call in to the show, 651-646-8255, to get your questions answered here with Curtis Zahn. We are talking about student loan debt and all of the different types of nuances that can be used in your favor to try to give you an affordable payment plan and, moreover, be able to at some point pay these things down. Another thing that I want to talk about is just fundamental money management, which is to say that when you enter into a student loan debt, into a repayment plan, rather, you need to know enough about your own personal finances to do that, not to take the word of a collections agent, which, as you said, Curtis, look, at the end of the day, I'm not even begrudging them. That's what they do for a living. Their job is to collect as much money as they can, and potentially the more money they collect, the more money they make. So, look, that's their job. They're on that side of the table. The challenge that I see is that people have a monthly payment plan that will be lowered somewhat. However, they know so little about their own personal finances that they'll enter into a payment plan, and be that as it may, less than what the payment was before, but no more affordable than what it was before. And it's a recipe for disaster because they're going to default because they don't take everything into consideration in their own personal budget. Do you see some of that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've listened to, when I was on the other side, listening to calls and people calling in and with the payment plans that were set up, and they'd go over everything, and they'd even ask, do you have any other payments? And the consumer would be like, no, that's it. And I'm thinking in my head, you're missing a lot of stuff. You're missing, any kind of personal products issues. You're missing maintenance on your car, not just the gas, but you need tires, you need brakes. You're driving, a 1968, Dodge Dart or something, something that has a lot of maintenance issues. And you got to kind of take into consideration
and
those things.
Are all reasonable expenses that would have to be, you'd have to make allowances for those within a payment plan, but people don't even know enough about their own finances. The other thing I'll just tell you from my side of the table, having been in the financial planning business for as many years as I have, 30% of my clients are other financial advisors who are no better at looking at their own personal finances than anybody else. They're very good at helping other consumers. However, when it's your own stuff, it's hard to look at it. A lot of times, financial people who have a financial background, graduate degree in finance, look upon their own personal finances as being frivolous, and their answer to every problem they've ever had is, I'll just make more money. And of course, they overlook these things. They get involved in payment plans that go bad. And then they're really on the business end of a collection agency's phone calls. And at that point, they need some help. They need somebody like you. What type of services can you provide to somebody like that? How do you get paid? Because obviously, when I consider an attorney, immediately most people are thinking, yeah, that's great. But if I can't afford to pay my bills, how in the world am I going to be able to hire an attorney to help me when I can't even afford to pay the bill?
Well, and that's kind of part of the key when it comes to this abusive debt collection. If a debt collector is calling you and not informing you of your rights or misrepresenting your rights or engaging kind of other abusive tactics, such as repeatedly calling you at work after you told them not to call you. And that's another thing they'll always tell you, you have to put that in writing. Well, that's actually not true. I mean, if you want to cease and desist all communication, that needs to be in writing. But if you just tell someone, I can't take calls at work, or don't call me before 5 o'clock, or call me, on certain times, that absolutely can be oral, and having that recording is always key because, of course, later they'll say, well, I was never told that. But if a debt collector has violated any of those laws, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, like all the other consumer protection statutes, provide for attorney's fees and costs and actual and statutory damages for the consumer, which means basically the other side is going to have to pay my attorney's fees and costs, and the client is going to be entitled to any actual out-of-pocket damages. But Congress realized that a lot of people don't have those. It's tough to prove. And so even if you can't prove any actual damages, you can get what's called statutory damages of up to $1,000 from each debt collector that violated the law.
Wow. So not only can you push them back, you could actually get paid and have them help you pay your bills.
Absolutely. And that's because Congress, with these consumer protection statutes, expected them to be mostly enforced, not by the government, but by private consumers bringing these actions. Because, let's face it, every year the FTC will bring a couple really big actions, but it's all these smaller violations against individuals that I think affect people and affect society in a much larger way. And Congress expected those to be enforced by, they kind of call them private attorney generals.
So you essentially are able to get paid for your services when you take on a case, and it could potentially not cost the consumer anything to hire you for that assistance. Is that correct?
That's correct. We take these cases on a contingency basis, meaning that when I look at your case, I'm going to meet with you and talk to you about your case, and if I think you have a case, I'll take it based on the fact that I'm confident that I'll be able to collect that money from the person who violated your rights.
Curtis, I'm going to be sending you a lot of business because if we can get this type of assistance and not have to have it come out of my client's pocket, that's phenomenal. I just don't think most people realize that someone like you even exists to help them in this regard, and I think people struggle with it. It's a source of frustration. They don't want anybody to know about it, and they just literally don't know where to turn. So I want to encourage anybody out there who's listening to this, if you or anyone you know of is in this position and is challenged with these circumstances of overwhelming student loan debt, they're in a position financially where they just simply can't pay, they feel that they're being pressured and they just don't know how to handle it, I want to encourage you to go to CYA21.com. Get Curtis's information and give him a call and schedule a time to meet with him, because Curtis can look at your case. He can determine if there's any validity to the case and if he can help you. And the great news is it isn't going to cost you any money to do that. And I think that it's just a service that in this environment with the amount of overwhelming student loan debt that's out there is just invaluable. So we're going to take another break here. I want to encourage you also to go to the financialcrisisbible.com, download the Financial Crisis Bible, and also go to the website CYA21 and get Curtis's information. We're here with Curtis Zahn from Champion Law talking about student loan debt and how to handle that and come up with an affordable payment plan, and also push these aggressive debt collectors back and get somebody on your side to help you do that. We'll be back talking more about student loan debt with Curtis Zahn from Champion Law.